Welcome to the March 14th, 2020 City of St. Peter regular council meeting. It is 7 p.m. Would all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. All right, we're calling the meeting to order. First up on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Is there, all those in favor of approving the agenda as distributed? Oh, yep. Do we?
Yep.
How about that?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The agenda is approved. Next up, approval of the minutes. The minutes begin on page 5 of the packet. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Any questions about the minutes? Call the roll, please, Barb. Gosh, you might be thrown off today.
Sorry.
All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The minutes are approved. Wow. First up, under item number 4 is visitor comments. Is there any visitor who would like to make comments on any agenda item? Seeing none, general visitor comments. Any visitor who'd like to make comment on any agenda item whatsoever? Seeing none, we will move on to approval of the consent agenda. The consent agenda begins on page 8 and concludes with the resolution on page 39. The consent agenda includes the following budgeted purchases in excess of $10,000. I'm not going to read the amounts, but I will read the vendor and item. First up, Irby of Egan, a 150 kVA 3-phase pad-mounted transformer. From Irby of Egan, a 1/0? There we go. 15 kV primary electrical wire. Farmer's Mill and Elevator, a 2020 custom blended turf fertilizer for 2022. Irby of Egan, a 500 kVA 3-phase pad mount transformer. From Coverworks, 4 steel shelters for Galt Park, Prairie Ridge Park, Warren Park, and Stones Park. Cross Country Underground 2022 electrical directional boring on new utility installations. Theco Inc. Chieftain Screener MGL 836X stacking conveyor rental. Irby Utilities 2 pad-mounted switchgear elbow connected. The following employee appointment is approved at the wage indicated, Zachary Solar, for the position of forester, and the schedule of disbursements for February 25th through March 9th, 2020. Are there any questions on the any items on the consent agenda? Brad.
Question for you, Pete. It's on the park shelters.
Yes.
Just curious. So first off, are the shelters? Is there going to be additional costs? Like, are we going to be putting concrete bases under those things, or are we just going to be going straight up? So.
This is just for the materials for the shelter itself.
Okay.
And so there'll be other in-kind services that we provide based on our budget.
Okay, that's what I was wondering, because I remember the budgeting was 27,000. I think 27,000 each for the 2 smaller ones, and then 45,000 each for the bigger ones. And I just noticed one of the smaller ones was significantly lower than the other 2. Is that
Right.
kind of to try and keep things, the overall project under budget?
That may be because of, after we reviewed some of this information with park boards and with staff, we may have changed the structure from a octagonal to a rectangular.
Okay, and that would be less expensive?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Well, seeing no questions, is there a motion to approve the resolution?
So moved.
Second?
Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Pettis,
Aye.
Councilmember Ram,
Aye.
Councilmember Shutterstone,
Aye.
Councilmember Bruflat.
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos.
Aye.
Mayor Noel.
Aye. Next up, unfinished business on page 40. We have a memo that starts on page 40 with the resolution on 44, adoption of an ordinance redistricting city ward boundaries and a resolution reaffirming the 2022 polling places.
So, Madam Mayor, members, as the mayor indicated, we have just really two actions for you today. First of all, the ordinance, and then setting those polling places is the second item. We've talked about redistricting a couple of times in the past, so I wanted to make mention of that. And under Minnesota State statute, you're required to take some action before the end of the month. As you know, redistricting occurs throughout the nation, and you're part of this kind of building block moving up the food chain and down the food chain on sides of government relative to where boundaries are located. Again, you've talked about this a couple of times, and 3 or 4 now options have been provided to you. The council indicated that you, at least it seemed to staff, you indicated that you felt best about option number 4, which is the option that's listed in the resolution, and the option that's before you this evening. We could talk a little bit more about what it means and how it all fits together, but I think we've had great discussion about that. I do want to mention that this has been talked about in the community in the hot sheet 2 times, well, actually 3 times. You've talked about it at council meetings, actually starting back in 2021, from August of 2021 and April of 2021. It's been mentioned on video blogs at least 3 separate times, and in the council packet a couple of times, including all the maps and options that you've seen have been presented to you. We've also had the ordinance posted on your website for the required amount of time under state statute that lists out the locations that are described by meets and bounds within the mapping that's included on page 42. So certainly staff would be open to any question that you have. You do not have to take action tonight. You really do have until the end of the month. So you have one more regular council meeting, or sometimes we call these business meetings, before the statutory timeline runs out. If you fail to take action, you guys don't get paid until you take action. So I think it behooves you to take action. Our goal has been to do it just a little bit early to give the county a little bit of a head start. Their timeline is compressed compared to yours, and so our goal has been to work with them in a positive way, and they've been very helpful with some of the mapping that's included in here. The resolution, or actually the ordinance, is what we'd like you to take under consideration first, and that's located on page 43. And then, of course, the resolution that's on page 44 relates to the polling place designation. One other thing about the ordinance that I want to make sure that we address very clearly, and I think we've been very transparent about, is that this ordinance is not just a change in the map compared to about 10 years ago, but it also does not have any reference to precincts. And so precincts would be, in effect, eliminated as a part of this. And we've talked about the pros and cons related to that, but I didn't want that to slide by without some overt opportunity for discussion about that. I think that's my report, Madam Mayor.
Any questions for Todd? Carrie?
If we waited until the next council meeting to approve, what other opportunities would we have to circulate this to the public?
We would put it in the hot sheet. I can't make the paper publish something about it. We've given them information on this, and certainly they get your council packets. I don't know that it would make a substantial change in what you saw or where you would go, frankly. Certainly redistricting and how the map looks is at the pleasure of the council. You really determine this. But I got to tell you, again, we've had it in multiple hot sheets. It's been on the front page of that. We've talked about it in video blogs. We've shown images. It's been in council packets with all of the different options. It's something that is talked about on, not us, but on the national news and at the state and local level. I think people who have interest know that redistricting is occurring. They might not know exactly that it's at this level, but I really don't know whether that would have a substantial impact. Again, part of our discussion has been is that if we do it a couple of weeks earlier, there's opportunity for the county to do its work and get it moving a little bit earlier, which I know they would appreciate. So.
And I appreciate, we received an email from the League of Women Voters today kind of challenging us on circulating this further and wider and opening this up for more public input in more creative ways. But I understand what you're saying about giving the county more opportunity to do what they need to do with their process, and so I don't feel strongly either way. I think you know better once you know better, and I appreciate that they feel, you know, like they can call us out if we can do better with engaging the public, and so I appreciated that email. I don't feel like I would make a motion to wait until the next meeting though, and let the process move forward. I wasn't there for the workshop when you discussed this, and I believe you had a really good discussion and gained consensus there.
Madam Mayor, if I could.
Yeah.
I mean, just to give additional perspective, it's been on the front page of the hot sheet on February 23rd and March 2nd. This was discussed on April 28th in 2021 and on August 27th, 2021. Now, there wasn't discussion about the specific map, but there was discussion about the process for this moving forward and the timeline that this process would be in. It was talked about on the city administrator's video blog on February 18th, on March 4th, and on March 11th. All of the maps and all of the information that you've seen multiple times was included in your packets on February 22nd and February 28th. Both of those, or at least one of those, was on video where it was reported as a part of a report at the end of your meeting that this was an ongoing process that was happening, in addition to the public notice issues that have been in place. So I think there's been opportunity. I do have to tell you, we did not have kind of this whiz-bang map, interactive map that everyone could move the lines around. If you had wanted to spend a lot of money on that, we could have. But I don't know the value there would be. I think redistricting is very important, and I think some of the commentary relates to whether it's complicated. And I would challenge and say that in our community, it's not very complicated, and the council's done a good job of making sure that it's not political. When it gets political, it seems to get complicated. But for us, it's more about the math and how many people live on what block and what makes sense to balance this as closely as possible. And frankly, whether you're working to balance it today or a couple of years from now that the statute or the rules might allow for.
Yeah,
I think you've done okay.
Yeah, I appreciate those efforts to circulate it, and with the means that we have. I also appreciate being challenged too, to think about it in a different way. So, thank you.
Any other questions, Brad?
Well, first, I think, I want to thank staff for the job they've done on pulling the maps together. And I think one of the main concerns that was raised initially with the League of Women's Voters was the imbalance of the first three maps. And I think with Councilmember Pettis and his option 4, I'm really thankful because straightening out Broadway A makes a lot more sense, and B actually essentially got rid of the imbalance. So Daryl, thanks for digging into that, because that was one thing I was wondering. You actually did the math on it, so I'm very glad. I'm very glad you did it, and I think we have addressed the issue. I think staff has done a good job pointing out. Besides being in the meetings, they've been in the packets, and the League of Women's Voters has been able to reach out, and I do think we addressed their main concern, which was an imbalance. And I also think the option 4 is a much more simplified version of the map as well. So,
Dustin?
I mean, the inner geography teacher in me loves the fact that people are looking at maps and paying attention to it, and we have interest from the league. And yeah, I greatly appreciate the feedback they gave us, because we took it to heart and looked at our first 3 maps that, look, we do have an imbalance of population. And although there have been some concerns voiced about there would want to be a little bit more public process, we have the line that makes sense. We all agreed upon it. The numbers between the north and the south are quite frankly minuscule, and any attempt to get it to be identical would be cutting out sections of a block, essentially, instead of having one consistent line going down Broadway.
It's probably harder to find a simpler map.
Correct.
Exactly.
Correct. And that was,
Exactly.
we all looked at it and said, this seems to be a no-brain decision.
Anything else?
Madam Mayor, you do have an ordinance that's included in your packet that we're asking you to
Yes.
pass, and then a resolution designating those polling places.
So we need to pass the ordinance first and then the resolution, or the resolution approves the
We would
ordinance?
like you to do the ordinance first,
Okay.
because that, if you did something substantially different than that, that could impact polling places.
Sure. So next up, unless there's any further discussion, is the ordinance that's on page 43 of your packet, amending the St. Peter Code, Chapter 2, Administration and General Government, Sections 2 and 3, Ward and Precinct Boundaries, and adopting by reference St. Peter Code, Chapter 1 and Section 1.6, which among other things contain penalty provisions. It's on page 43. Is there a motion to approve?
So, second.
Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Pettis,
Aye.
Councilmember Ring,
Aye.
Councilmember Sherrstrom,
Aye.
Councilmember Blueflat,
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos,
Aye.
Mayor Noel,
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
The ordinance is approved. Next up, the resolution designating city and combined school district 508 polling places for elections beginning August 9th, 2020, on page 44 of the packet. Is there a motion?
If I could,
Yes.
just mention one thing, just for clarification for people that might be watching, this is not changing our primary polling places. Primary polling place in the north end of town will still be at the Armory. On the south end of town, it will still be at the community center. And so we're not changing the location, but it's a best practice to make sure that we notice this appropriately on a regular basis. And I think this meets that best practice.
So when I go down to the Armory, there's not going to be a line down the middle. Everybody's going to be voting in.
Yeah, that will be the practical implication. Folks that are moving by nature of your redistricting, lots of people will be receiving notices related to where, everybody will receive a notice where their new polling place is, even though it might not be a new polling place. You have about 8 or 10 blocks here of folks that are switching from one location to the other.
Daryl.
I have a question, actually. With our change in wards now, will there be additional city elections due to these changes, due to population moving between the two wards?
Oh, it's a great question. No, there will not. This does not impact where any of you serve, and so it will not.
I know when you work on the county side, if there's a certain percentage changes districts or whatever, that triggers an election in
Yeah.
both of the districts and things like that, but that does not happen in city elections.
That it does not happen in city elections in this instance because none of you are moving that location, or moving location from one ward to the other.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Brad?
Just out of curiosity, why are we setting the, for like those that are outside of the city limits, why is the city setting the polling places where that?
Well, it's a little bit of a belt and suspenders approach because we administer the elections for the school district. And so in the past, this has met the criteria that the school district has to meet statutorily as well. So a little bit of a belt and suspenders approach to that.
Anything else? All right, no, there's no further questions or discussion. I'll take a motion to approve the resolution.
So moved.
Second?
Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Ring,
Aye.
Councilmember Sherrstrom,
Aye.
Councilmember Blueflat,
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos,
Aye.
Mayor Noel,
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Pettis.
Aye.
The resolution is approved. Moving on to new business. First item, adoption of a resolution calling for a public hearing on tax increment financing district number 1-20. Russ?
Mayor Noel, members of the council, Assistant City Attorney Winkler. Tonight, you're asked to pass a resolution that would call for a public hearing to provide for an amendment to Tax Increment Financing District 1-20, precisely an amendment to the budget of that Tax Increment Financing District. TIF 120 was established in 2016 to support the Traverse Green housing subdivision. It includes all of Traverse Green, the single family to the south, the multifamily to the north, and then the phases that would exist between those two. In 2020 then, Community Asset Development Group undertook the construction of a 67-unit multifamily apartment complex that opened here in December of 2021. At this point, it's 80% occupied. And I can say of the first, I believe it was 36 families that moved in, 32 had relocated to St. Peter from out of town. We haven't kept track of that going forward, but that was from the first report after the first month. CADG is extremely pleased with the project, and they'd like to proceed as they had planned previously with the construction of the mirror image of that development directly to the west. CADG is proposing a 67-unit multifamily. The county has determined that the estimated market value of that property would be $9,170,000. And it would generate about just under $140,000 in annual tax increment. CADG, as they undertake the second one, has asked for a tax increment deal similar to the structure of the first development, which I think is going to be mutually beneficial to both CADG and the city. You will recall CADG in a housing project then would obligate the developer to have 20% of the units occupied by families with a median income of 50% or lower. So for a single person household, that would be just under $30,000. And for a family of four, it would be just about $43,000 a year. Those are from the 2020 figures. So they've been adjusted 2 times. I got to get them from Shannon Sweeney. I'm here because he's not tonight. So, that is a way that we would obligate them to provide some affordability without having any particular subsidization of any particular number of units. TIF Plan 1-20, as I said, was done in 2016. Some of you that may have been on the council in 2020 may be wondering why we didn't have a similar amendment done at that time, and it was because the budget of the first multifamily could be incorporated into the budget of TIF District 1-20 as it would exist. At this time, we need to make the budgetary adjustment to account for the $9.1 million in value, and then just under $140,000 in tax increment revenues then, which would be returned to the developer. You have a resolution in your packet on page 48 and concludes on page 49 that would contemplate calling for the public hearing to be held at your regular meeting on May 9th. At that night, you'll also likely be asked to adopt a tax increment development agreement as well as the development agreement for the physical development of the neighborhood and extension to Clark Street and some of those other matters. Mayor Noel, I'd gladly answer any questions you or members of the council might have.
Any questions for Russ? I guess you answered all of our questions.
Well, I'm glad to do it.
Well done. The resolution is on page 48, calling for a public hearing on the modification of tax increment financing district number 1-20 within municipal development district number 1 and the adoption of a modified tax increment financing plan relating thereto. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Sharstrom?
Aye.
Councilmember Bruflat?
Aye.
Councilmember DeBoss?
Aye.
Mayor Noel?
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson?
Aye.
Councilmember Pettis?
Aye.
Councilmember Wham?
Aye.
The resolution is approved. Thanks, Russ.
Thanks, Russ.
Next up, adoption of a resolution awarding bid for 2020 North 4th Street improvements, Broadway to Chatham Street project. Pete is here.
Mayor Noel and City Council, our 2022 project is on North 4th Street is what we're planning for, and that runs from Broadway to Chatham Street. What I'm asking you tonight to do is to award the bid to Nielsen Construction. They were the low bidder on the project at $158,570.75. The project entails very similar to what we've done along the North 3rd Street and several different slugs through there. And we are going to do some sidewalk updates, intersection updates to meet ADA requirements, removal of curb and gutter where it's an issue, which is 99% of the area there. They will mill the street, and the city crews will then put the street back in upon completion. As you can see from the project funding sources, the streets budget will pay for roughly $45,000 out of the project. We will be assessing or allowing waivers to be signed for $63,000. 40% is paid for by the homeowners. And then stormwater will pay the remaining improvements. We will be doing some intersection improvements there for drainage where we currently have problems. There are 15 properties impacted. Now that we have the bids out, our staff will put together waivers and then go door to door like we have in the past. And it is our goal to have 100% waiver signed by the time we're ready for the contractor to come in and go to work. There is a resolution on page 52 that we're asking for authorization or approval to begin working with Nielsen Construction.
Thanks, Pete. Any questions for Pete? Daryl?
Will there be any debt issued on this project, or will it be all out of current revenue?
It'll all be out of our regular maintenance budgets. Stormwater has this amount budgeted in its current budget, and this is part of the streets maintenance package that you guys have already approved for in the regular streets budget.
Any other questions? All right, seeing no questions, the resolution before us is on page 52, awarding a bid for 2022 North 4th Street improvements, Broadway to Chatham Street project. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Blumenthal.
Aye.
Councilmember DeVos.
Aye.
Mayor Noel.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Pettis.
Aye.
Councilmember Ray.
Aye.
Councilmember Sharpston.
Aye.
The resolution is approved.
Thank you.
Next up, adoption of a resolution awarding a bid for 2020 Minnesota Square Park North Plaza Phase 2 project. Pete, you're up
Mayor
again.
Noel and council, I'm here tonight to ask you to authorize Nielsen Concrete to complete the work in the amount of $123,461.80. As you guys are aware from the map on page 55, this would be the second phase of our improvement coming from College Avenue. This would tie our Phase 1 improvement into the pavilion. As you remember, our goals, as we have talked through this with the Parks Board and with the City Council, is to make a nice presentation for our customers, which are the citizens of St. Peter, to use Minnesota Square and the pavilion that was raised here a few years ago. Our tie is also that we want to make sure that the downtown is connected to the square, and in the future you will see us come back with some improvements planned for North 3rd Street along that way from the food co-op all the way to College Avenue. That's still in the planning process. The goal here would be to begin work on this project after the 4th of July. Actually, staff's going to do some of the work beforehand, but we'll have it in a method or a manner that we can actually use the park during the 4th. Along with the Mason shelter that is planning to be constructed here this spring. And then Nielsen will come in after the 4th and do the concrete work. City staff will do the restoration with dirt and hydro seed along that line before a rock bin comes in. So if everything falls into place, which is a fairly tight schedule, we should have everything rolling by rock bin for our customers. There is a resolution on page 56 that we're asking for approval.
Since you mentioned it, Pete, I'll ask if the Mason's shelter is going to happen. We've been, supply chain issues have
It
held
is.
that up, yes?
It was delivered in December, I believe it was, maybe late November there. And it is at our shop right now, and crews are making plans to do some work there. And when the contractor is doing the other portion of the sidewalk that has been bid, it's our goal to put that shelter up so they can do the concrete as part of their regular bid package.
Excellent. People are excited about that
Yep.
shelter. Yeah. Any questions for Pete? Carrie?
So for Rock Bend, if everything goes according to plan, will that area still be roped off, that project area, so?
We're hoping it's usable by that
Usable?
point.
Okay,
Yes,
that's the plan.
absolutely. We'd love it to be concrete and grass where we're planning the improvement, and it's ready to go.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, the resolution is before us on page 56, awarding a bid for 2020 Minnesota Square Park North Plaza Phase 2 improvements. Is there a motion to approve? So moved.
Second.
Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember DeVos.
Aye.
Mayor Noel.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Pettis.
Aye.
Councilmember Ray.
Aye.
Councilmember Sharpston.
Aye.
Councilmember Blumenthal.
Aye. The resolution is approved.
Thank you.
You bet. Up next, let's see, adoption of a resolution adopting updated construction standard detail plates.
Mayor Noel and City Council, again, you'll see on pages 59 through 67, I believe it is. 66, you'll have a variety of different standard details. I won't bore you with a lot of the information, but maybe I can answer questions. But really what we're trying to do with these details is to button up areas where we saw construction deficiencies last year and/or allow, like on the light standards, new standards to be developed so that we can replace some of our existing infrastructure that's faltering, that's not available anymore. And along with the residential concrete and driveway and walk areas that are on there, those are from last fall's change of how we looked at putting new curb cuts in. We went through that and we told you that we would bring back a standard for you guys to approve. And so our engineer made those changes. And then the last one is for the mailbox installation. Although during our snow removal process, we did not have too much damage this year, we do have a snow removal policy that describes what the city is going to pay for during those situations. Homeowners have asked then, how should I put that mailbox back in? So they just really wanted a guideline for that to be a standard. I know I have fielded a couple of different questions on the mailbox standard, so I'll just explain that the standard that we're using here meets two criteria for us. One is readily available through your local lumber yards as kits. And so most of the time when customers come in, they just want to know, what can I do? This pretty much meets that standard. This is not a MnDOT standard or a MnDOT application, since we don't really have roads or provide for the authority on highways that are over 40 miles an hour. So this is really just our residential standard and how that moves going forward. So wanted to provide a little bit of guidance on what we can do for the customer.
Thank you. Any questions for Pete? The resolution is on page 67 of the packet, adopting modified city standard detail plates, utilities. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Call the roll, please, Barb.
Mayor Noel.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Pettis.
Aye.
Councilmember Ray.
Aye.
Councilmember Sharpston.
Aye.
Councilmember Bluestar.
Aye.
Councilmember DeBoss.
Aye.
The resolution is approved.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. Last item under new business, adoption of a resolution approving wine and on-sale beer licenses for River Rock Coffee.
Just as a reminder, for council member renewal license typically come on your consent agenda, but new license requests come as a separate or new agenda item. So that's why this comes to you this evening. We've had an application from River Rock Coffee for wine and on-sale beer. If you were to approve it, the licensing period would be through 6/30/22. Happy to answer any questions. The background research has been done, and there's nothing, at least from my office or from the police department, that would remove them from opportunity to receive a license.
Any questions for Todd?
Is there any reason why or is this the dates in which the license would be good for?
Yes.
So only for a 3-month time?
This would match the cycle of licensing that we
Okay.
have, which is
Okay.
that June, July of each year.
Sounds good.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
they would come up on the consent agenda next time around.
Yeah, so as they get information and reapply, in June, you would see this again on the consent agenda. Unless there was some problem.
Sounds good.
Any other questions? The resolution on page 69 approving business license applications for River Rock for wine and on-sale beer. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Pettis.
Aye.
Councilmember Ray.
Aye.
Councilmember Sharpston.
Aye.
Councilmember Bluestar.
Aye.
Councilmember DeBoss.
Aye.
Mayor Noel.
Aye. The resolution is approved. We are on to reports, and the only report I have tonight is a Women's History Month proclamation. Whereas women of St. Peter of every race, class, and ethnic background have made historic contributions to the growth and strength of our community in countless recorded and unrecorded ways, including helping shape every major progressive social change movement, And whereas women of St. Peter have played and continue to play a critical economic, cultural, and social role in every sphere of the life of the city by constituting a significant portion of the labor force working inside and outside the home. And whereas women of St. Peter have played a unique role throughout history of the city by providing a large portion of the volunteer labor force. And whereas women of St. Peter are particularly important in the establishment of early charitable, philanthropic, and cultural institutions in our city. And whereas women of St. Peter have been leaders for the betterment of the city, now therefore I, Shannon A. Noel, Mayor of the City of St. Peter, Minnesota, do hereby proclaim March 2020 as Women's History Month and call upon the citizens of St. Peter to participate in Women's History Month activities, including the April 5th, 2020 Women Celebrating Women event in the theme of Women Providing Healing, Promoting Hope, in witness here whereof. That's it for me.
Madam Mayor, I have two reports, but I would yield the floor, first of all, to Council Members DeVos and Sharstrom, who attended the APPA legislative rally in Washington, D.C. My hope is that maybe you'll provide a thing or two that you gleaned from the education and networking opportunities and talk about whether it's worthwhile for the time and energy that goes into that kind of work.
Well, first off, it was very beneficial to familiarize me as a newly elected official, and quite frankly, any elected official, of how can you do better as a municipality providing affordable and renewable energy. It's easy to say that we want better rates for our utilities and we want it to be renewable, but the process of doing that is far more complex. And in being there, we met with SIMPA and we talked in great detail about how to get to the 80% by 2030, and Pete's helped to guide us along the way with that. We also were able to meet with lawmakers and representatives for them, staffers, to talk about getting to that 80%. And then the challenges of getting that final 20%. And then also it was very fresh in everyone's mind. That was right when the invasion of Ukraine was happening. And the topic was brought up of how do we protect our infrastructure and what are the costs associated with that to make sure our local power is safe.
Well, first of all, I'd say when I first joined City Council, I didn't know I'd be turning to Pete Moulton for fashion advice. But, but I will echo what, I'll echo what Dustin said, that this trip was definitely worthwhile for election officials. I strongly encourage basically the City Council to make it a habit of each council member rotating through every 2 to 3 years. Basically, as from a networking perspective of being able to speak to lawmaker staff members, we had some of the House of Representatives. Ironically enough, the 2 senators from Minnesota flew back to Minnesota. So
With the president.
With the president. So we weren't able to meet with senators directly, but we spoke with their staff members. But just being able to meet with other SIMPA members, particularly Rochester and Austin, we spoke with quite a bit. Got to meet Joe Hoffman, who's the new essentially Director of Government Relations for SIMPA. He basically was the Public Works and City Administrator for the City of Preston, and just being able to meet him and understand him moving into the new role that's currently held by Chris Schoenherr. I thought that was very beneficial. We had a very long walk back from the Capitol to Old Ebbets Grill. Had a good time to connect with him and just learning where other cities are in their renewable journey. And what we can do, and honestly, what's available to us even right now of the low-hanging fruit from SIMPA. We've got, St. Peter itself was allocated 130 kilowatts of renewable, which we've used 4 kilowatts by the compost site. Pete's investigating, Pete is researching 76 kilowatts, similar to what we were going to do last year at the wastewater treatment. And just looking, where can we go from here in just even with what SIMPA has available to us. And I think that was one of the most important takeaways is what are other people doing? What can we do to mimic them? What are the challenges they're having? And I guess I would just say the biggest thing is we can do stuff without breaking the bank. Other cities are proving it. We can make incremental changes ourselves. So.
Thanks, Brad and Dustin.
Any other questions about the APPA rally or how that works and what its goals are? It is a great educational opportunity, not just networking, but educational opportunity. It's been a little bit hamstrung certainly over the last, what I would consider now 3 years, but I think that will change in future years and there'll be more opportunities for additional education.
Todd,
as part
people
of
at
that.
home might not know what SIMPA and APPA are.
So APPA stands for American Public Power Association, and so it's a nationwide group that St. Peter happens to be a member of. And it really is an organization that deals primarily with lobbying efforts to promote municipal electric utilities, but also does some best practice work and policy driven activities for cities. SIMPA stands for Southern Minnesota Municipal Power, and that is the organization that we buy electricity from and have now for 30 plus years. Maybe it's almost 40 years now, Pete.
1977.
Yeah, so Pete is one of the board members there, and before Pete, Lou was, and I think certainly St. Peter's had a significant impact on SIMPA, and we see lots of great folks that work there who are very smart about what they do, and so I think it's a general rule, hang around with smart people and you get smarter, and so we try and do that as well. So anyway, thank you.
Yeah.
The second one that I have on my list, I'm sorry.
Emily.
Sorry, I was just gonna say that the South Ward has all gone to DC now. It's the North Ward. Step up next time. No.
Challenge accepted.
The next item that I have is Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities Legislative Action Day. Councilmember Johnson attended that on your behalf. And so, Carrie, I turn the floor over to you if you have any comments that you'd like to share.
Sure. So Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities Legislative Action Day is an annual event, postponed the last couple of years. We've had to do it virtually. But this year it was in person at the Capitol, and it's an event where Greater Minnesota cities can advocate for themselves, a dedicated day to lobby their legislators. And so in the morning, Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities holds a program, and so they talk about what are their priorities, their legislative priorities that they're working towards. And we're also a member of Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities, so I should have said that. But the second half of the day, I met with Representative Ackland and Senator Frentz, and I talked about CGMC priorities through a St. Peter lens. We don't have a big bill that we're asking them to sign on for or to push for us, because we did that last year with local option sales tax. So this year I talked about local government aid and advocating for more funding for local government aid. That's a huge part of our revenue stream. And it hasn't kept up with inflation, and so there's a need for more funding. I also talked about housing and some of the House file housing bills that are out there, and Senate file House bills that are out there, so that they were aware. And I talked about the Highway 22 trail that needs to be funded. That is something regionally at Regional Economic Development Alliance we've been talking a lot about, working with other cities on that in local groups. And so I wanted to give our legislators a heads up that they'll be hearing more from and some advocacy on that later down the road. So yeah, kind of focused on those three topics. I didn't have a lot of time, of course, with them, and so I did a follow-up email and just outlined what we had talked about so that they can keep St. Peter top of mind as they do their work at the Capitol. So it was an honor to go up there. I really enjoy advocating for St. Peter any chance I get. So thank you.
Thanks for representing us.
Madam Mayor, that's all I have listed for reports for tonight.
All right, well, if there's nothing else on our agenda, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The meeting is adjourned. Thanks.
That was